I'm your host, Matt Haistings, and thanks for joining today for another episode. I'm excited to have a conversation with my sales manager, Jared Fleischer. Jared Fleischer runs the Compass Plano real estate office, home of a number of top agents, and he's a longtime resident of North Texas. So we're going to have a great conversation of all things North Texas and real estate. So you've been here a few decades in Dallas area. What are some of the most notable things you've noticed that have changed about either the landscape or the people or the culture during that time?
You know, I'll say it's, I worked when I first got into the real estate industry as an agent. I worked in the downtown and uptown market, and this was in like 2006, we'll call it. And there wasn't a whole lot of residential lifestyle in those areas yet. They were the places that, like living lifestyle, they were the places that people came, from the city, maybe, some parts of suburban Dallas or Richardson or Plano or wherever it was, to go and have nightlife. That was like, the financial district of Dallas, but there was very little like residential living in the city itself. You had a couple of old converted buildings that had maybe become lofts, some condos here and there, but not a lot. So over the course of time, that changed dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
Where Dallas, the metropolitan part of Dallas became a bustling residential kind of hotspot. You started to see high rises getting built, other old buildings getting converted, a lot of rehabilitation and renovation of some old buildings that hadn't had much happen to them, like the Statler Hotel comes to mind. That sat vacant and decrepit for decades. At one point when that was opened, I think in the 60s, it was the largest hotel in the Southwest, sat there vacant for decades. They come in and revitalize it and bring, kind of some of that. The cool part about that is they kept
So when you were a kid, it was like a haunted hotel.
It was. Well, it was scary. I mean, it was like being downtown, being in that area was just, during the day, it's, bustling, if you want to call it, because people are working. But at night, it was like a ghost town because nobody lived there. It was just commercial usage. But now you go down there and I mean, it's thriving every night of the week. You have so many more people, and not just young people are moving down there too. There's so many working professionals that are moving down there, and there's families that are moving down there as well.
I thought the family part was peculiar, but my perception of where I would live with a family is probably different than somebody, especially people want an urban lifestyle.
That's right.
I showed a condo down there this summer that was a pretty high-end condo, and I just didn't expect to see it. In downtown Dallas.
So that's one thing you see. You've seen the landscape change some. We've built some big buildings down there, so the landscape has definitely changed. A big thing that's changed here is just the demographic of people that live here. People who lived in Texas were from Texas. It's very rare almost now for me to meet somebody who is like a native Texan or native Dallasite like me. I mean, everybody I meet has come from somewhere else.
I bet in your neighborhood too is like half or more transplants.
The transplants, that's probably the better word to use, transplants. But there's such a diversity of our population of where people have come from now, where when I was younger, it was the people that were born and stayed here. So I think that's brought a lot of culture to the city, because it's brought a lot of different perspectives and opportunities to kind of service, a different population, different ages, different ethnicities, different all sorts of things. So that's, I think, been a huge change here, is like the maturity of the population growth.
Well, I think heading up north too, when you were younger as a kid, like I'm sure Frisco existed, but I don't think it was anything imaginable to what it looks like now.
I mean, I'll say as a young adult, as in like an adolescent and young adult, Frisco didn't exist. I mean, Frisco was a 4-letter word that nobody had heard of, or an F word that nobody had heard of, I mean, I remember my parents were small business owners, and they opened up a retail shipping and mailing center in Frisco in 1995, I think. I was in high school, so we'll call it 94, 95. And I worked for my parents in high school. I helped, again, retail shop. You go in there, mail packages, buy stamps.
Like the UPS store.
Like the UPS store, exactly. Before, before those were, a thing. They were all, small business owners, who owned and operated them. And I remember they opened this place in Frisco, and I was like, where do I have to drive to go out there? It was a Saturday. And, my dad's like, well, you just keep going down 75 until you get to this exit. And I go, I've never even heard of that. And it was El Dorado. And I honestly didn't even know
wow, yeah.
El Dorado was an exit off of the highway.
Yeah.
And so I get out there, and the only thing there was El Dorado Estates, which was an established neighborhood that was built like in the 90s and on the golf course. And there was an Albertsons. And like that was it. And you were starting to, I saw, a bunch of wooden frames up. You were starting to see some houses getting built, but it was farmland. It was FM roads. I mean, it was FM roads. There
Farm
was
to market.
That's exactly what it was.
So crazy to think about now.
It's crazy now. Now you can't even keep up with what the growth is happening out there.
Yeah.
But it was a dramatic. I mean, the north growth and expansion has been dramatic.
I mean, I think it's going to continue.
Absolutely.
The growth north.
100%.
Until you get to Texoma.
Until you get to
Oklahoma.
Until you get to Oklahoma. I mean, each time I hear about a new city that's, first it was,
you're like, where's that?
It was McKinney and it's Prosper Salina, then it's, Anna,
Melissa.
and then it's Melissa, and then it's, Gunter. And you're like, there's another one I can't remember, but they're starting to get to the ones that pretty soon it's going to be in Sherman,
Right. Yeah.
You're in Denison and
When you're
Sherman.
talking about 75.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is crazy to think about. I had clients who bought a home in the colony, but they were young and their parents were kind of involved in the search, and they had lived in, what's the place that's with the gates in Frisco, not Stonebriar. All the Cowboys players live there.
Oh, Starwood. Yeah.
Yeah. So they said they had lived there early on when it was just like a sleepy little community, and you had to drive to Plano to go out to dinner. And I was looking at them like, what are you talking about?
That was Plano. Plano was kind of the end. It was like
the end of the road.
That was it. The North Dallas Tollway stopped at Frankfurt. It dead ended at Frankfurt, and then in order to get to say like Marsh, you had to cut through a couple of like residential streets just to get over to something like Midway or Marsh. Like it stopped.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was crazy. I had some friends who had an apartment over there. Funny enough, when we were in high school, they had an apartment our senior year, and it was over off of like Kelly and Frankfurt. And the only way you take Tollway, and it stops at Frankfurt. You get off, and you'd have to take a couple of little weaves to get to essentially, we'll call it, Marsh or so.
Right.
But there was no easy way to get over there, and then it was literally past that when the tollway stopped was just a barrier in fields. That was it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's just communities.
You almost can't keep up with it unless you're in that. Unless you're in that environment every day, it's almost hard to keep up with.
Yeah, it's cool to think about the growth and exciting too.
Mm-hmm. And the great thing,
I'm bullish on North Texas.
I am
not
too.
Everywhere, but not. I mean, not everywhere in the U.S., but definitely North Texas. I'm bullish on.
Well, and that's the great thing about here from a real estate market perspective is I believe North Texas is about 12,000 square miles. Like what we consider our from downtown to all the way getting almost to Oklahoma and to Fort Worth and almost to, not Tyler, but it's enormous. And there's still so much untapped potential there. Yeah. So, as it continues to bring more people here, there's more opportunities for development. Yeah.
It's fun to see. I think it'll continue.
Yeah.
I'm excited. But it does change. Like you said, it changes the familiarity as the growth happens.
It does. It's hard to keep up with it. Yeah.
If you're thinking about somebody who maybe wanted to move to Texas, what would you say are like the defining features that stand out to you?
Well, I think that, having not lived continuously anywhere else. I mean, I went to college in Missouri, and my family's from the Colorado, from Denver area, and so I've spent a fair amount of time there. Going up there to visit because I have a bunch of family.
Great state.
A lot of them have starting to pass away, or but as a kid, I had a ton of extended family there. So I don't have a ton of insight into what it's like in other places, but I feel like the population of this city, just the people have always by and large been kind. It's been a kind hospitality. We're a southern state, so you hear about the southern hospitality and so forth.
It's real.
It's real. I mean, that doesn't mean everybody here is amazing, but I mean, there's a lot of people here, so you're going to run across some ones that aren't, but I think what I love so much about it is, it does have a lot of things for everyone. Now one of the things we're lacking that we just can't control are beaches and mountains. We don't have that. We can't recreate. We got
lakes.
We got lakes. We got a lot of lakes.
We got lagoons.
If you like boating, we certainly got that.
Yeah. Are you a boater?
I am not a boater.
Yeah.
I am almost anti-boat.
Really?
Yeah. Boats freak me out.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't like not being in control. and I don't know how to drive a boat. I mean, I have driven a boat before, but I certainly wouldn't say I'm skilled at it. But I've had a couple of not so pleasant experiences on boats.
So you want your feet on the ground.
Yeah. Or, I mean, if I don't mind being on like a big boat, where it's
like a cruise ship.
Well, not a cruise ship, but just like a bigger boat. Like you get me on a ski boat on Lake Louisville in the middle of the summer, like that's kind of probably the last place I want to be, because if you haven't been out there, it's nuts.
I have not. Well, I've been on the lakes here. Possum Kingdom is
one. I love Possum Kingdom. I went there as a kid a lot.
Growing up, I grew up in Northern California, and we had, the lakes are beautiful there. Mm-hmm. And my grandparents had a boat, and we had a boat, and we would go water skiing and hang out. And the water was cool though in California, so that was like a summertime activity. Yeah, lots of fond memories. But here, it's just never been on my radar screen as something to do. Well,
and it's not. I would guess it's not so easily accessible here too. Like we do have lakes, but you got to go this way to get to this lake or that way to get to that lake. You don't have a lot of like natural resource sometimes, like right in the middle of where everything is.
Yeah, you're not right on top of it.
You're not right on top of it. You can't see the ocean. You can't see the shoreline from your house.
If you
or driving
need
down the highway.
Texas is not the place for you.
Texas is not the place. But
if you like kind people,
the good people, I think there's a lot of there is a lot of diversity of again of just our population as a whole. So I think, we've got great restaurants, we're like kind of known.
I was just talking about with somebody. I believe that the restaurant scene here is very underrated.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I mean, people who, if you love food, like, we've got all sorts of different opportunities there. I think from an entertainment perspective, we've got, of course, you got the Cowboys. People love that and so forth.
Yeah, you like sports. This is your place.
You got good sports scene here.
You're a golfer.
I'm a golfer.
I perceive a lot of golf courses here.
There's a ton of golf courses here.
My general perception is that like per capita, there's a high ratio of golf courses to people.
Well, you can play golf 11 months a year here.
True.
Or sometimes 12 months a year. I mean, the last couple of years we've had some challenges.
Did you golf this year over anytime in December?
I did.
See?
Yeah, I did. And
you'll probably golf in January too.
I played golf on December 30th in shorts,
Right.
I mean,
that's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's 80 degrees here today.
I know. This is the weather that hooked me on Texas, I think. I was living in the Northeast and I came here on my recruit trip, and it was like, what? The Northeast is just brutal.
Oh, it's brutal.
Winter.
Yeah, it shuts down for like 6 or 7 months. Yeah.
And it's literally frozen. Like, I came here and I was like, this is amazing. Like, yes, I accept this offer.
Yeah.
Then the first winter I was here, it snowed like in early December, and I was like, I got rid of all my sweaters. I thought,
right. This isn't supposed to be a thing here.
I thought it was supposed to be hot all the time.
Yeah, I can count, my kids are, they've been fortunate the last, 2 years to get some snow.
Yeah.
Of course, my kids, they don't get to see snow, right? I mean, unless we go to Colorado or something. So we get some snow the last couple of years, and now they're kind of expecting it every winter. I'm like, well, guys, don't
get your hopes
up.
I've
been here my whole life, and I can count probably on, one hand the amount of times it snowed in the winter.
So not often.
It's not often. But the weather's here, the weather here is great. So it gives a lot of opportunity for outdoor activity, even during what you would think are months that you can't do that.
Do you golf in the summer, like in August?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty toasty.
It is hot. Yeah. I mean, it's humid here, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, but I mean, I will say the last couple summers up until this one was pretty brutal. 2022 was a tough summer.
But I think it's, just part of living here.
It's just part of living here, and I mean, it's so, but I think that, for active people, there's a lot to do here.
Yeah.
Because you have so much opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of active, I wanted to talk about real estate with you.
Of course.
And it has not been super active lately with real estate, but I think a lot of our audience is wondering what's going to happen. You mentioned being in the market 20 years, and including being in the market during the housing crisis, we'll call it.
Yeah.
What's similar? What's different this time around?
I'll start with the differences because, I mean, to me, they're pretty noticeable. So, yeah, having been in the industry, when we had the big recession in, 2008, 2009, it was, caused by different factors, right? You had a lot bigger kind of global economic things happening. Yeah. You had financial, institutions that were collapsing and going bankrupt. You had car manufacturers that were collapsing and going bankrupt. And a lot of it was driven by the the housing market, but it was driven specifically in the mortgage industry. So you had, a lot less regulation over the mortgage industry, a lot more predatory type lending practices that happened. And born out of that was like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which, came in and, slapped all these, big banks on the hand and mortgage lenders for their predatory practices, and still kind of a
current closing disclosure is a result of the.
It is, instead of the CD, is a byproduct of CFPB, and so there was it was a little bit more, for the lack of a better analogy, the Wild West at that time, because there really just wasn't a whole lot of regulation on what was happening. In 2004, 5, 6, financial markets were booming. People want, banks want to lend money. They just want, they're just, throwing it out, making it rain. And, we had a big demographic of people that were, looking to get into homes. And this wasn't just locally here. I mean, this was obviously a national thing. It hit really hard in some of the big metropolitan markets, thinking of, like Miami and Las Vegas and Phoenix and area, obviously California. So that was, that kind of bubble was built up on, a house of cards, for the lack of a better way to put it.
A lender told me, we were giving loans to people who had no business getting a loan.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, why did you give them? Well, that's what everybody did.
Well, they were called no-doc loans.
Yeah.
I mean, you almost didn't even, all you really had to do is prove that you could breathe.
Are you a real estate agent listening to this podcast? Our team is growing. To find out more about joining a fun, service-minded team, go to hastingsre.com/careers. That's HAISTINGSRE.com/careers.
But there was no oversight of, any qualifications to get one. And that was the whole subprime market.
It's so fascinating comparing to now.
It's,
getting a loan is not always pleasant.
Right. They say you have to give up your firstborn, right, to get a loan. I think it's calmed down some. I think when we were, as a country, when we were first coming out of that crisis and seeing some recovery, the early 2010s, there was an extra emphasis on making sure that things were being done right. So it was really challenging at that point to get a mortgage. And of course, a lot of those rules and regulations are still in place, but there's been some loosening of those.
Pendulum kind of goes both ways.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a difference. I mean, similarity wise, I think, I would just say demand is similar, because at the time there was a lot of demand for housing. That's not really changed.
So pre-bubble or post-bubble?
Well, it's like pre-bubble, right? So the things that led up to the massive growth we'd had and kind of collapse was a lot of demand. And that demand, while it may have stagnated for a little bit, I don't think it really ever went away. It just kind of paused for a lot of people.
People still need to live somewhere.
They still need somewhere to live, right? And so, we had a lot of foreclosures, and those were getting, those people were getting opportunities there to get into homes at less affordable, more affordable prices. Yeah. The demand now is pretty intense as well. But the difference is that, we're coming out of kind of an unprecedented, last 24 months, almost 3 years.
It's not normal to sell your house in one weekend?
Correct.
For 20% over what you think it's worth?
Correct. Well, and just the factors are different, right? So the factors this time, we'll start first and foremost with just the pandemic, right? So that shuts down, the country as a whole almost, for the better part of a minimum, 8 to 10 weeks, we'll say at the beginning. Yeah. And so from a housing perspective, everybody starts working from home, they pause on what they want to do or what they thought they were going to do. We can't move right now. We can't even have anybody come into our house. We can't go look at houses. And so the demand subsides again. Yeah. But then things start to reopen. There's no inventory because no homes were coming on the market. Demand skyrockets, interest rates plummet even further, population growth in North Texas continues. And
it's like the perfect storm.
You had a perfect storm of factors that created this intense market we had for the last 2 years. And those factors weren't kind of fake. They were real things that happened.
The pandemic changed people's preference for housing.
Correct.
People kind of got asset rich during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Too, which was really counterintuitive to me. I would have expected the opposite to happen.
Well, people were flush with cash and markets doing fantastic, right? And so I've always kind of looked to the luxury market as a leading indicator of what, I call the general market is going to do.
Yeah.
And so the luxury market, because typically people who have, I'm not saying general market people don't have cash, but when you're in the luxury market, a lot of those people, there's more cash there. More cash. And they'll typically put it in places that feel secure. And real estate historically has been that. So you start to see the luxury market kind of pick up and kind of go crazy, post-pandemic. The general market will follow, and there's a lot more opportunity there because it's a higher dense, population of people. And so that's what happened. And then there's got to naturally be some slowdown. I mean, it's market, real estate's a cycle.
Yeah.
But the cycling here is different. We're not crashing. We're curving back to the mean, which is good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
we're going back to
normalized
what it should be. So, when we do comparison of 2022 to 2021 or 21 to 20, I kind of almost have to look at the last couple years as a bit of an anomaly. Like they almost deserve an asterisk, asterisk in the
normal.
Not normal. Yeah, like in the annals of time, these years are like it should say asterisk.
Please exclude from your averages.
Yeah, pandemic years. Yeah. So that's where we are. We just looking at some statistics, for what our North Texas market did, year end. They align up really, really strongly with like 2019 and 2018, which were good real estate markets.
Yeah. I remember that being a great time for sellers.
There was a great time for
fine for buyers too.
That's
like
right.
they transact comfortably.
Yeah.
I felt really uncomfortable like in early 2022 when you're like, if you're not bidding $100,000 over, you're not serious. It's like, I know this is a big ask, but this is what you got to do.
Yeah, how do you tell somebody that?
And then they don't, and they lose, and they're like, well, at least we know you're not lying to us.
Yeah.
But you're like, it's crazy right now.
Well, if I can ask you a question, having been on the front lines of that more so than I have, that conversation that you have to have with people, like, what's the barrier you have to get through to get them to believe you?
Yeah, I think you have to have a lot of credibility. And as horrible as it sounds, I think you have to lose a couple times. You have to taste defeat for a buyer before they're ready to, take the plunge and get the house. And all my buyers who went pretty big last year are still ahead, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other plus is like their cost of ownership is so low on a recurring basis right now. They had to put a lot of cash in, like they're locked in at really great payments. But I think it was really hard to build rapport. Like a lot of people reach out to us online in our team, and so we don't have a relationship with them first. So as we build rapport, and oftentimes after they lose one or two offers, they're like, "Oh, okay, you're not just trying to get me to bid up. Like you're serious. I have to do that."
Right. Yeah.
Which it's kind of tough. Like part of my job became being a counselor last year.
Yeah. Well, and I think I would think that whether you're a first time home buyer or you bought several homes before, being in the position where somebody tells you, if you want to even have an opportunity to get this house, you got to think about going $100,000 over the price. I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow.
Right.
Even if you have the cash, or even if you're looking at it from a payment perspective and saying, okay, it's going to adjust our payment $400, $500, $600 a month. We can do that. I mean, it's $100,000.
Cash.
Cash.
Not like you're going to get a loan for this amount.
Correct.
You're going to have to bring cash.
Correct. And so that's, I feel for the people who had to go through that. The people to get into homes, it's tough.
And that's not normal.
No, it's not normal. I remember being in a couple of multiple offer situations, during that timeline.
Yeah.
And you're talking, and the fact that, you had somebody say, oh, by the way, we've got multiple offers. You're like, what's the.
So the house is 200 and we're going to get 208.
Well, you're like, what's the odds of that, right? You have a house that's been on the market for 90 days and all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I think we got some room to get to this number. Here's what I would recommend you come in at. And the next thing you know, they're like, oh, by the way, we just received another offer. And you're like, okay.
Are you sure?
Are you positive about that? And so, you're thinking, okay, we'll go like 5,000 over or, maybe 7,000 over. I had one that sold for 1,000 over. It was multiple offers and it went for, it was a $170,000 house that went for 171,
right.
And so when you start getting into the types of numbers we did and in the luxury market, it was even crazy. Like $500,000,
last year.
$500,000, $600,000, $700,000 over.
To think about.
And a lot of these people are just paying cash, period. So it's, it's not just out of pocket for the overage. They're buying their houses in cash. Yeah.
They'll say they're writing a check, but they're Actually sending a wire transfer.
Exactly right. Yeah, liquidating something, and So it was a very unique set of circumstances that that didn't come about because of irresponsible practices, right? It was just where we were, and people were willing
Supply
to do
and demand,
it. Supply
right?
and demand. That's a simple. I mean, we had record low levels of inventory.
Right.
I mean, when you're talking about, you have a week's worth of homes in certain areas, and the valuation was changing almost on like a biweekly or bi-monthly basis.
Yeah, it was hard for agents to price houses too.
It was. I talked to some agents, at the time this was happening, and was like, asked them, where are you pricing homes? And a lot of them, I mean, kind of the answer I got across the board from a lot of people is we're going 10% at a minimum above what the numbers show us, because that's how quickly it was escalating. And then even then, they're still going way over.
Yeah. So now do they crash?
So do they what?
So now the prices crash?
I don't think they crash. I think they correct.
Yeah.
And so, yes, are there going to be people that paid these, exorbitant amounts, and they're not going to be able to sell it for that this year? Of course. Now, does that mean
in 5 years they might be able to sell it?
5 years
for
they
more
might
than
be able
that?
to.
Yeah.
Does that mean they don't have equity in their house? No. Right.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, people still have equity in their home. Right. And so they're coming in an equity, they're already coming in an equity position to begin with, but I mean, people are still putting money down. Right. So they've already got equity built in there. Yes, they may have had to, extend some extra cash to get it done, but they're coming in a position, there is continuing to be appreciation. We're just not appreciating at the rate we were. I read an article recently that, if you standardize the appreciation rate, it was about 4% in 22. Like if you go back to the standardization of it, that's what it really was. I mean, granted, I know that's not what it says it is, but that's kind of where I think we're going to fall, is in that normal level. So I don't think there's going to be, a bubble burst of pricing. I think for builders, they're probably going to have to, as they continue to build, they'll be the ones that will come down a little bit more, a little bit quicker.
They also have a lot of margin in there
They do.
too. I mean, they escalated their prices very quickly.
They did, yeah, and some of them were certainly unrealistic.
Yeah.
But I think for the average person who purchased a home in post-pandemic up to this point, shouldn't be worried about their asset being worth something far less than what the market value is of it.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's delusional.
It is. Yeah. I mean, if you're in a position where you bought at the height of the market and, let's say you get relocated or some life occurrence happened and you have to sell, well, you might be, taking a little bit of a loss there from what you paid.
On the flip side, if they took that money out of their crypto or their stock account, they might still be way ahead.
Certainly crypto.
So I guess it matters. If they change one asset class to another, at least real estate's more stable.
It's always, I mean, it is a state. I mean, it is, I think, anybody who talks to their accountant or tax advisor or whomever, financial planner, will always tell them, like, that's a safe haven for money.
So back in 2007, 2008, there was a lot more inventory on the market too, if I'm not mistaken.
There was. So like
months and months of supply.
Kind of going into what, became that recession, I'd say it's probably, lower than where we're at now, but not as low as it was, 6 months ago, 10 months ago, 12 months ago.
Talking about the inventory?
Inventory. Yeah. So going into pre-recession, right, when the market was really good, inventory was lower.
It was low then too.
Yeah, but it wasn't, a month low. It was a couple of months of inventory. Coming out of the recession, post that, there was a lot. I mean, there were some areas that had 10 months of inventory, right? I mean,
it's a lot.
It was a lot of inventory. I mean, there was, people couldn't sell their homes too. I worked in the condo townhome market, and it was almost impossible to get financing
that's a tough one,
on condos, townhomes post that recession. So there was a lot of people that were leasing their properties out because they couldn't sell them.
Yeah. A lot of people became landlords
or lost it. A lot of people lost their properties. But what happened is that we had this, excessive amount of inventory, and then, we got a little bit further with that in our rearview mirror, and then all of a sudden, the demand never really had gone away. It just paused, and then it starts to pick up, and we exercise that inventory pretty quickly to where then it's really been a bull real estate market, since 2010, 2011. That's where we've been.
More than a decade.
You know, I mean, it's gone up, it's escalated, it's never really gone down. Rates at that, the rates dropped precipitously, post that, and they didn't get down to 3%, but, rates were pretty stable in the 6 to 7% range. Again, the norm, kind of where we are now. At that time. And then to encourage a uptick in the housing market, the Fed keeps cutting the rate, down to we're zero for I don't even know how many years it sat at zero.
Yeah.
And so that, helped stimulate the housing market. And then it took off. But it took off like at a good scale. It took off at a gradual scale, which is, I think, why as we come to this point where we're seeing some correction, we've had enough history between that recession and now that we've corrected the errors that could cause like a housing crisis.
I think people just have it like as a scar in their mind. So just any like sort of idea that it might be happening, people start to pull back and perhaps even overreact to it.
Yeah, I think, that's probably natural for some people too, to just like, hey, I'm gonna take a break and I just want to see what's gonna happen. I still have the need, the desire, the determination to get it, but I'm gonna kind of see what happens for a moment.
And it's a long-term
It's
play.
a long-term hold, yeah.
I think the financialization of our economy, people think in pretty short cycles versus like, I'm going to own this home for a decade. Or I had somebody tell me, I'm going to die in this house.
Yeah.
Right? Well, your heirs are going to make a lot of money.
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So, but people tend to want to think like, oh my God, home values are going to go down this year.
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
Yeah.
I've had a couple buyers recently say, well, we think prices are going to go down 20% this year, so we're going to wait.
Yeah,
I happen to have a belief in my life that all things are possible, but it doesn't make it probable.
I've heard a couple of things that had, I don't know if it was so much pricing as it was just activity, like overall sales could be down as much as 20% this year.
I think people are conflating that number.
Yeah, maybe.
It's very believable to me that we have less homes sold.
100%. Yeah. I mean, when we started to see kind of the shift in 2022, kind of from the mid-year on of last year over year from 21, we saw a reduction in just total number of homes sold. We'll probably see a reduction of total number of homes sold between now and, early summer, we'll call it maybe late spring, because the beginning of 2022 was still so frenetic that we're going to naturally see a little bit of a downtick on just numbers. But I think when we start to get into the summer and compare against last year when we were seeing a reduction, I think it's going to be pretty flat. I think it could go up or down a couple of percentage points either way.
Yeah.
I think it could go either way. I mean, I don't see us dropping 20%. The whole
I think
year.
I think a lot of things have to go wrong.
I do too. Yeah.
For that to happen.
I think a lot of things would have to go wrong.
So, I mean, at that point, we're not worried about home values.
Yeah. At that point, there's
we're worried about getting drafted or something.
There's some serious, global crises happening, and other financial markets are collapsing, and
suddenly, again, though, when other financial markets are collapsing, at least with real estate, you have something to show for it at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah, it's a tangible asset.
Yeah.
That's why when you see when financial markets go down, people start investing in gold and silver and platinum.
At least we have something to show.
Yeah,
I've never been a big fan of
they
crypto.
get out of equities and they get into
I know people are going to hate me, but I'm just not. Crypto is a hard one for me to wrap my head around. I'm like, there's nothing to show for it. Like
I've never understood
just
it.
like, I mean, I get the conceptually why it's nice. It's very portable and exchangeable, but there's nothing valuable left.
Yeah. I was selling something recently, just like selling some old stuff that I had. And, they're like, would you take Venmo or Zelle? And I mean, yeah, I do. I mean, I have. But I'm like, I'd actually prefer cash. Like, I know it's kind of a lost art, but I actually would just like cash.
Just go to your ATM and get me cash.
And it's amazing now how many places won't take cash. And I'm like, it's currency. Like, what do you mean you don't take cash?
Yeah.
I mean, I candidly hardly ever pay for things with cash, but I like to have some on me just in case. And it's kind of shocking when you see places that, card only. You're like, well, I have money though. Like, don't you want my money?
Look at my card's not working today. Right? Yeah. It's really interesting to think about. I mean, millennials sometimes when they go under contract, I used to always tell everybody to write a check for the earnest money.
Of course.
I've since stopped doing that because like millennials, you're like, do you have a checkbook? And they're like, no. Okay, well, we're going to go to the other options. And later I've learned I like the other options better. So I just start by recommending those. But I just always thought that was funny. Like, oh yeah, no checkbook. Okay.
No checkbook.
Yeah. So continuing on real estate, looking at this year ahead, what do you think obstacles are going to be for sellers?
I think the obstacle is going to be, I don't know if it's so much an obstacle. I think buyers are feeling a little bit more empowered now. You know, I mean, yes, rates have gone up, right? I mean, that's just the reality. Like that's not changing. You know, so you get with it and you'll be okay with it.
Have they gone up, or as we said, have they just gone back to normal?
Well, back to normal. They've gone up from 2022, but back to kind of some normal levels. So I think I think buyers definitely have a little bit more of empowerment and the ability now to purchase. You know, it's a little bit more of a level playing field, and that's not across the board. I mean, there's certainly plenty of areas. We had our team meeting in here, our sales meeting yesterday, and had several agents talking about, got multiple offers on their sellers' homes.
I've seen a lot of that so far this year.
So it's not as if it's, not happening. You know? But from a seller's perspective, I think that, having some faith in the fact that the demand is still real. It's absolutely still real. And if you're home and it's never really changed, the old moniker in real estate, when I got started, it still is to some extent, I think, is, location.
Yeah.
I
really took that for granted as a new agent. And then it like clicked like a couple years and I was like, oh yeah, it really is all location.
It really is. But I tell you now, I think where the sellers have the best opportunity is to have their homes ready to sell. You can't
be lazy anymore.
You can't be lazy anymore. Like you got to stand out. When a home has been well cared for, well appointed, renovated, whatever it may be, those homes are still pulling the premium dollar. They're pulling the buyers, right? Because a lot of buyers now want turnkey move-in ready.
Right.
And so, from a buyer's perspective, though, we have heard that there's been, more seller concessions that have been given, than more so in the last 10 years. So, sellers are willing to give a little bit. So, whether that's helping with some closing costs or providing, some type of concessions, against something getting repaired or to buy a rate down. That's a big thing that's going on right now is getting a concession from a seller for a rate buy down. I know you've told me you've done a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. And I think that window has closed, but buyers had a lot of negotiability in the fall. And I'm like, let's exploit this and see how much. Like if I'm my client, I'm going to do my best to take care of you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's exploit that and see what we can get the seller to do for you. But I think that's gone now. Like it's a new year. I think now anybody who's a seller who's listing their house has had time to recalibrate their expectations and is not going to give as much away.
Well, but I would think too, some of that recalibration might be they're looking at the price now and going, okay, we were maybe unrealistic. So their house may be coming back on the market and that may go away, but maybe the price has come back to something that's more of an advantage for the buyer now.
I think this is a challenge for buyers because they're like, prices are falling. And I'm like, sellers are reducing their asking price. I wouldn't conflate that with like home values.
Right.
Like I looked recently and in Plano, the average sold price per square foot was $215 for last year. And the average listings are $235.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a mismatch here.
There is, and that's a big. I mean, that's a big.
That's
number.
a big gap.
That's a big number.
Now, some of the listings this is the beginning of the year. There's some listings that have been sitting around for a while. So, of course, probably some of high expensive ones and ones that are just totally outlandishly overpriced. But I'm like, well, this is a challenge, I think, for the marketplace, but for sellers too. Like, getting more in touch with what's their home is worth.
Well, and it always takes the seller market, time to catch up to what's happening in real time.
Yeah, buyers are there now.
Yeah, buyers, buyers know what's happening in real time.
They're making the market.
Yeah, sellers, it takes a little bit of time for that to sink in for them. Like, when we had this correction in 2022, when we came out of, craziness and chaos and kind of started to see, a little bit of a pivot backward, they don't see that right away, because it takes a while for the numbers, nationally, locally and nationally to catch up. So they keep hearing home prices soar, record number of homes sold.
Yeah.
In the meantime, that's data that's, been in the past. Like that's already happened 30 years.
This is from February 2022. This is not true anymore.
That's data that's 30, 60, days old at the minimum. So, and we're going into this is, historically the season of the market we're going into is the busiest. We're coming into the spring market. I mean, I know it's winter, but the spring market, generally picks up in February. Like and your busiest selling months are typically April, May, and June. I mean, that's, if you go look at historical figures for Dallas Fort Worth, those are the months.
I find it peculiar because I've kind of thought it would be like just strong throughout the spring, summer, into the fall.
It's strong.
It's not. It doesn't go down wildly, but it's amazing how, like, in terms of closings, how much activity there is, like in August or April. I mean,
yeah, April. Yeah, and then it may dip a little bit in the mid to late summer, early fall, off of maybe that May June number.
The back to school, the
back to school, the vacations, but it's still high. It's still, but from an agent perspective, you come off of running, and then you get into that, and you're like, wait, what happened? But then you realize, oh, well, it's still busy. It's just like not as busy as those other months.
Yeah, this has been, I think, on our team, we have some newer agents. And so it's like educating them, like, well, this just feels like 2019 again. Like, you were running so fast. You were going 180 miles an hour. And now we're going 60. 60 is not exactly slow. Like, right. Yeah. It's still pretty brisk pace.
We're not in a school zone.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to think about where we're at now. And I'm bullish.
I am too. That's my overall sentiment for 2023 is that I am confident, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
That we're going to have a solid market this year.
Yeah.
I think there's a great opportunity for sellers to, get an elevated price over maybe where they came in, depending on, where they've been in their house and where they bought it,
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah. It always depends on, where you came into it and how long you've had it. I mean, homes don't just, overnight in a year, turn out, 35% returns.
What?
Yeah.
What? I thought that was normal.
Right.
I think this is a challenge for like under 30, those buyers who are basically first-time home buyers have a different expectation, They're like, when are interest rates going to go back down to normal? Well, we're here.
This is it. Yeah.
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 Like,
it was.
What do you mean my home's not going to go up 28% this year?
Right. That's all they know, right? Their normal is 3% interest rates. When, again, if you look at, I had a historical chart. I wish I could remember it, from heart, but, only a handful of occasions in the history of since mortgage rates, started, were they ever below 4%. I mean, we can count them, and we've been in that, right? But even again, when we had a great market in the, the mid 2000s, interest rates were 6 to 7%, and that was an amazing rate to get. So it's all relative. It's all relative to what your experience is and where you've been. But I think, understanding and accepting from a buyer's perspective that, a 6% interest rate isn't a bad thing. It's not at all. Yeah. And there's always going to be opportunities if they do go down to refinance, right? So when you find a property that, suits your needs and fits your needs, and you have the ability to do it.
Right.
And you can always, I mean, I would worry about, if you're worried about, a couple $100, I mean, I'm not saying a couple $100 a month isn't a big thing for people when you're budgeting, but if the thought is that, I can't make myself pay that because it's going to go down. Well, that may not happen as soon as you want it to. Right?
I mean, I can't count the number of times people have said, we're going to wait until next year. And then their affordability went down. And whether that happens this year via prices or interest rates, I think it's a real possibility. Like the waiting gets compounds over time. Unfortunately, most people can't have their income go up super fast every year. Which is why I say if you can have your income go up a lot every year, then sure, wait. Like you're going to constantly have flexibility in your budget. But like if your income isn't going to constantly go up in 10% a year.
Yeah, which typically they don't.
It's not normal.
Yeah, incomes couldn't keep up with houses. You know? And now I think we're going back to that part where they should be able to. If you get back to the normal appreciation, like the hope is that they do keep up. But yeah, I mean, I've always looked, my personal, thought process for homes, specifically the one I'm going to live in is that, yeah, it's an investment, right? So you're making a calculated decision and you want to make sure you're making a good decision and you're doing your research and you got your great agent doing that, helping you there. But, buy it for your need, right? Yeah. Buy your house for what you need and worry about the investment part of it on the back end because it'll be there. It's, if you have a need and a want and you want to be somewhere.
And there's so many other factors too, like lifestyle factors. Talking about being in a neighborhood that's great and like having the amenities you want. Like those are part of the price and the investment value, but like they affect your life every single day.
That's right.
It's not like a 10, 20 years down the road when we sell this thing.
Yeah. Well, in houses, you can own stock, equity, crypto, whatever you own, and you can look at a daily thing and be like, oh, it fluctuated this amount. I mean, if you want to do that, you can. Houses aren't like that, right?
Right.
Your house gets judged kind of on an annual basis, and the closest thing you can come to that is your tax value.
Yeah, which is totally out of whack.
Which is totally out of whack here.
Yeah.
But there's no barometer for you to every single day be like, oh, my house lost 2% of its value today. It's not doing that.
Plus, it's not a quick transaction when you want to.
Right.
Like, you can't unload it like you can.
Right.
I do think, like, when you think about crypto and blockchain and all that, like, I think some people are going to create ways for houses to like change hands faster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to be common. Probably it'll not happen here quickly either. It'll probably happen in the Miamis, New York's, like San Francisco's. But where people can transact a little faster by just like trading the house, like trading paper quickly. But I think that's a long ways off.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think
most people aren't going to buy a house online like this.
No.
Not knowing the schools or if the furniture they love is going to fit. Or,
there's so much more to
or
it.
Or if the neighbors are total wackos.
Or if you're, let's say, you're relocating, right? And how many houses did we have that got bought sight unseen, over the last 2 years, and then they're on a FaceTime video or something like that. But then you come here and you're like, well, this neighborhood isn't what I like, doesn't look the same as I did, or it's better than I thought it was, or whatever it is,
I made sure it was always better. I don't want people to tell me, oh, you let me buy this expensive house in this neighborhood.
Right. They show up and they're like, I paid how much for this?
You didn't tell me about it.
Right. Yeah.
I usually try to talk down on the virtual tours. Mm-hmm. Now, after I've talked down, you still want it? Okay, good. Now we can do it. Yeah. So you've seen a lot of transactions as a sales manager and kind of having a broker role. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about deals gone wrong. I always find that funny.
Well, I'll say from the perspective of what I see most common, and this is almost kind of like post the sale happening, comes down to like disclosures, right? So that's like the most common thing that I've seen in my, experience is that, somebody gets into a house and they find out something about it that, they felt like they should have known. Mm-hmm. Right. And so then as the agent there, you get pulled back into it because, your client thinks, your buyer client thinks that you should have known about this, or how come you didn't bring this to my attention, or how come they didn't tell me about this? They must have known. So
there's the assumption that sellers know. And you're giving people a lot of credit.
Right.
They may have forgotten more about the house than we know.
Yeah. And if you've lived in a house, I sold my, my first home, I bought in 2007 and sold it in 2018. And when I filled out that seller's disclosure, I had to really think about it. Yeah. We'd renovated it twice. We had some plumbing issues. I had to kind of really sit down and think about all the stuff, and I wanted to be as transparent.
Well, you're in
as
industry,
I could.
but most people are just like, let's just fill this format, and they're not malicious.
No, not at all, not at all. But and I think that's the thing there. So transactions gone wrong. I think from a listing agent perspective, educating a seller about the importance of that document. And that it's a statutory state law on disclosure. Mm-hmm. There's only a handful of circumstances that exclude a seller from having to do that.
Yeah.
So educating your client on not what to put on the form, but being accurate and thorough is really important. Other things gone wrong, really kind of sometimes just, I hate to say this, but just incompetence in the industry is a thing gone wrong.
That's why I came here. I really liked the caliber of agent, and that was really important to me. Mm-hmm. But the barrier to entry is pretty low.
It is, and I've always thought. And
unfortunately, even being what I think of as relatively good agent, I can end up getting in a transaction with not a very good one, right?
Right. Yeah.
I can't control the house my client falls in love with.
That's right.
Or the one buyer that comes along, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a challenge industry wide.
It is.
Mostly for clients, I think the good agents can maybe even mask the fact that we're dealing with a bad agent on the other side.
I think so.
But it does. The person with the bad agent has the potential to get in a lot of trouble, I think.
I do. And that's where I think, as an experienced and, knowledgeable agent, you've got to, for your client's sake, not take your own sake, your own self out of it for, making sure, but for your client's sake, picking up that slack and really making sure that, everything is filled in appropriately, and that there's not something, put inside a contract that could put your client at a disadvantage or a liability. And that's a lot of times
attention to detail.
That's critical. And that's the job of a real estate agent, is to understand the contract they're explaining to their client.
What are you talking about?
I mean, they're put out there, by the real estate commission for real estate agents to use, and an ability to explain them, clear and concisely to your client, so they understand. They're signing an enforceable, they're signing a legally binding document for hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus. And so being able to explain that to them, I think, is paramount to like building that trust and that reputation in the industry, that you're somebody, when you bring a client to a property, and you've got a qualified buyer, you're going to bring them to the closing table, short of something you can't control. And so, common things, like a lot of it really over the last couple of years, a lot of it's just been, lack of attention to detail. Yeah. It's been the expedience of the market, and I think now as we're going, I think when you get into a market like this, and when I say like this, I mean, it's just slowing down back to the norm.
Where a home doesn't sell in 28 minutes.
Right. Where you don't have to write an offer from your car and wait, and wait in a line of 50 people at a house to get in.
My parents, I was home over the holidays and I wanted to go to Starbucks, and I was like, let's go inside now. And I was like, oh, this is a nice inside. And they're like, you go to Starbucks and sit inside a lot? They're like, you're not really a coffee drinker. And I was like, no, but I have to go there to write offers.
Yeah, that's right.
I show the house. It's too long to drive to the office or home, so I'm in there writing the offer. Yeah. But we try to have two sets of eyes look at our offers before we send them out.
Absolutely.
But it'll be interesting to see. We have that new contract coming out. Like, how many agents are caught off guard by that?
Right. Well, there's going to be plenty. I mean, I've seen. I've been through a lot of rounds of contract updates, and
they're subtle, but they're subtle. They do matter.
These ones are fairly subtle. We had a couple of big ones that happened in 2021, about 2 years ago now, that were pretty. Those were some pretty big changes, and it took a while for those to get kind of adopted. These, a little bit more subtle, but nonetheless still important.
Right.
But I think, like I said, some of the errors, some of the real estate things gone wrong, a lot of times just come down to the competency of the agents, and I don't mean to put that on, it's, if something bad happens, it's the agent's fault, because that's certainly not the case. But there's a lot of things that can get solved if they're corrected early on.
Most problems are communication problems.
Yeah, that is. I mean,
in life and in real estate.
This is a cooperative industry that we're in. So we rely on our fellow, realtor, colleague, broker, whatever you want to call it, to be a part. It's a partnership. For whether it's 10 days, 14 days, 30 days, a couple of months. You're working together. The end goal is to both serve your client the best way you can. And I always looked at a good real estate transaction between a buyer and a seller happened when both parties gave a little and both parties got a little.
Yeah.
You have somebody giving something and somebody getting something. That's an equitable transaction. We weren't there for the last, couple of years. Sellers were getting everything. Buyers were giving everything.
They get everything, and they're like, can we ask for more?
Yeah.
And you're like, they're already giving you everything possible. There's nothing in the contract to protect them at all. And you want more?
Well, it's funny, just to give I remember this very, very vividly. In my last office I was at, I had an agent who had a listing that they had put the agreement as $750,000. Okay, so it was a $750,000 house, and do the whole private exclusive thing, and all that.
So it's an off-market sale.
Oh well, but it's coming to the market.
Yeah, okay.
Right. So I mean, their intent was to totally come to the market, but they wanted to do this just to kind of gauge what the interest was going to be, because as a seller in that market, you didn't know until it happened to you, right? Like you have your agent telling you it's going to be crazy. Like, just leave your home for the weekend. Like don't even
go on vacation.
Go on vacation. Take your dogs, your cats, whatever
You'll
it is.
have to go into Texas because nowhere else is open.
That's right.
Go on vacation.
Right. Yeah. And so, but this one really stood out where the house hadn't even hit the open market yet. I mean, it was available, but it really hadn't been available, for all agents to go through yet. And they got an offer immediately for $950,000.
$200,000 over.
$200,000 over.
Yeah.
And because the agent's like, I mean, this is better than we could have hoped for. Like, I thought we could get in that mid to high eights, but we got one right off the bat for $950,000.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you don't say, well, let's still go on the market. You never know. But the sellers were like, I mean, they're like, he remembered the way he told it to me because these were friends of his. And their immediate response was like, that was nowhere near what we thought we would get. Like they're thinking,
What?
they're hearing
Yeah.
the stories, right? And they just got an offer for $200,000 over
Right.
before it's really even on the market. And they weren't like elated. They were just like, okay, well, let's keep going.
Let's see,
Yeah,
they're
and
really not giving us their best.
Yeah, and you're like, I mean, oh my gosh, that's an amazing offer. Like, this is like $400 a square foot. I mean, it shouldn't have been that, And so it's just, yes. I mean, so sellers made out good, but I think, where we are hopefully this year, and this is kind of what I think the market's doing right now, is it's an equitable deal. There's opportunities. Again, it's all, there's certainly a bunch of variables that are dependent, but, sellers are going to, do okay. Buyers hopefully will be in a better position, to get some concessions, whether that's price or whatever it is. And we got some balance.
Everybody can have a win now.
Everybody can have a win, and I think that hopefully that'll take away a little bit of the friction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of friction the last couple of years, a lot of emotion. It's hard for somebody to think, why do I have to pay this much more money for the home?
And make a decision,
and I can't
not
get
overnight.
one.
I couldn't even sleep on it. I have to decide now.
Right. I have to, I can't even see it. I have to put an offer in before I'm physically capable of being in the home, and so I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for not just for the not just us. I mean, take the real estate profession. It's a good thing for consumers.
Right.
It's benefiting them.
Sellers think they missed out, but I'm like, well, your home didn't go down in value since then. And now you don't have to deal with the craziness or the extra stress, like the high drama of like, here are your 15 offers. Let's pick the one you feel most comfortable with.
Right. And
it's almost like a game show, right?
Yeah.
Like which one's the trap door that we don't know about?
Yes. Like no whammies, right?
Yeah. We don't know like what can go wrong on any of these, but because they all came quick and fast and high.
Right. And
they're vetted them as best we can, but it's a lot more stressful.
Well, and they want to make a decision too, and they want to make the right decision, right? And so then they lean on their agent to help them make that right decision. But at the end of the day, like, when you have that many, you're doing everything you can to find out all the information to try to get the right one to get them to closing. And I saw a lot of situations too over these last couple of years where the highest offer didn't always win. For a lot of people.
I had a couple that last time. We picked yours because it was just the overall best.
It was the most solid offer, and it was also probably you were a competent agent who wrote a complete offer, who was communicative, explained everything out. Ask them, ahead of time what was important to the sellers, and I think a lot of sellers, that means a lot to them. A lot of, I mean, money is certainly, a driving factor. But I think for a lot of sellers, it's like they just, this is their home. Like they put, they got married in it. They had their family in it. I know when I sold my house in 2018, my wife and I sold our house, we lived in a desirable neighborhood. We had multiple offers, and, we had the family that ended up buying it was relocating here from New Jersey, and we had a couple offers that were, I mean, they were, if one or two may have been like $1,000 or $2,000 higher.
They were close.
But these people, like they met us at every turn, like they did everything, and we didn't ask them to do anything. They just went out of their way to show how much they really wanted their house, wanted our house, and they even like called us. I'm sure their agent was like, "Don't do that."
Please no.
I mean, and I was like kind of hesitant to talk to them.
Especially
in my position.
Industry,
yes,
like, this is maybe not good.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Yeah, but it was. But I think for a lot of people too, they just want to know that they're how they
it's like their baby sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's a little bit what makes it special being an agent is that it's not just a transaction. Like I really do appreciate that we're helping people with starting a new chapter. I mean, Compass says help everybody find their place in the world.
That's right.
But that's like there's some truth to that too. Like it could also, for people that are first-time home buyers, it seems like you can change like the whole trajectory of their family too.
Absolutely.
I mean, some families have generational wealth off of grandma's house.
That's right.
And almost by accident, but it's just cool to be able to think about that.
It is. Yeah. And that's, I mean, it can be, life altering.
Yeah. So. And then it becomes a home too, which is way more fun when they call you up 6 months later and they're like, come over, let's have a drink. We want to show you all the things we've done.
Yeah.
So that's special to me. It's not all just transactions.
That's right. It's not. I mean, you're building a relationship with people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a relational business. There may be an exchange of a commodity between, the buyer and the seller. But from a real estate agent perspective, it's a relationship, that's being forged and hopefully built over time. And, I'm sure you've got tons of clients that you become good friends with. And,
oh yeah.
And, that's the great part about.
No, I'm not very friendly.
That's a great part about this business is it is a people business. I mean, you could be the, smartest financial, thought provoker, know the market upside, inside and out. But, if you got to relate to people, you got to be able to read people, you got to be able to, commiserate with them, empathize with them. And I think people will choose to do business with people like that because there's a trust built.
Right.
And so I think those were the best. The people who have longevity in this business are the people that kind of operate their business that way.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was agents, not just our clients, but I suspect a lot of people listening to our podcast and watching our channel are agents. If you're a new agent getting into the business, thinking about, do I go solo? Do I go team? Like what advice would you give one of those agents?
Well, the industry is kind of skewed. I mean, I've watched it happen.
Yeah.
Has skewed a lot more, heavily to the team model. I think a lot of brokerages recognize that and, have set their service offerings up to support that. I don't think it means they're not supporting independent agents, but I think they realize that that's kind of the direction that for the time being that this industry is headed. As a new agent, I mean, first and foremost, if I were stepping back into time and circumstances were different 18 years ago, but if I could, go back in time, if I could borrow Doc's time machine
We wish we all could.
and do that. First and foremost, I would get as much education and information as I could from like seasoned agents. Like I would really, make it a important part of my progression and growth to just be a sponge to, that doesn't mean, annoy them and nag them, but I mean, I would really lean heavily into, those professionals. In terms of joining
and they've seen things like that's the subtle nuances of things that go wrong that the experienced agents can really, I think,
that's right,
share with a newer agent.
100%, because it's all, you take the real estate courses, right? And they teach you what's in a book. And then you get your license, but there's no real world application that's happened yet.
Conceptually, you know what happens when you put that in that box,
right? But realistically,
practically, what does this actually work out to be?
Right, and it very rarely happens that way. There's very rarely like, everybody signed. Oh, they gave. I mean, everybody did everything just to the T. I mean, that's like the white unicorn of this, right?
People need to be coached.
So there's always some speed bumps that you're going to have to deal with. So from a new agent perspective, I think just leaning into the people around you, getting, immersing yourself in, what you can learn from them. In terms of being an individual or joining a team, I think if you can find, if that appeals to you, find a team where the culture part of it, fits in with what you're looking for, because every team is different.
Right.
I mean, there's, a lot of them operate, and there's no right or wrong, just a lot of them operate differently. But finding one that's going to, support you, that's going to invest in you, emotionally, educationally, that's, wants you to be a part of something, I think that's an important thing to look for. I don't think it just comes down to, where am I going to make the most money? I think
for a new agent to think,
I think that's, I think that's, listen, if you do well in this industry, that will take care of itself. There's an opportunity that if you can be successful and you can show your value,
take care of people.
That will take care of itself. Right. Good quote from Tiger Woods that, golf quote, he was the number one ranked golfer in the world for nearly a decade. Like if you take I think they said the next 10 or 12 golfers behind him and add up all their weeks as number one, it still isn't even half of what he was number one. But they used to talk about having the number one ranking for so long. And he said, I don't worry about the ranking. If I win golf tournaments, I'll be the number one ranking. Like all I got to do is focus on the golf tournaments, not the ranking, right?
Yeah, focus on taking care of your clients.
Yeah, focus on
the important things.
Focus on the important things. Focus on being in the moment, taking care of your clients, thinking about, how you want to build your business, and that part of it will take care of itself. Right. I think there's benefits, I look at sometimes of individual agents. I think there's, benefits of being an individual agent sometimes too, like you're kind of, in
your own boss,
master of your own destiny there in some regard.
Your own boss until you remember your client's your boss.
That's right. That's right. I think, there could be, a certain type of clientele that likes just dealing with one person.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge benefit to being able to go into a presentation with the seller and talk about the team you have around you. So I think it comes down to just really kind of personal preference. I think it feels like where you feel like you can have success. But I think, with the propensity now for newer agents to really kind of gravitate towards teams, I would just say, make sure that you're interviewing them too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an opportunity.
It's like dating, really.
It is. I mean, it's it shouldn't feel like, you're as a new agent, necessarily maybe beholden to them, in some regard. Like it's, there's going to be opportunity for you there. So take advantage of it, but make sure it's the right fit. I know like when I got into the business, I joined a brokerage that, I immediately regretted joining and it's because I didn't do my due diligence, and I'd have a lot different questions now, but I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so
what would you ask?
I think that's, number one, I'd probably ask, what is the support structure for a new agent? Like if I'm going into new brokerage, like what type of, culture am I coming into? What type of opportunity am I going to have for education? What type of opportunity am I going to have for collaboration? It's not about what split am I getting?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously finances are a part of everything, but it would be, is this a place where I can come in 10 years from now or 5 years from now, whatever it is, still feel like I'm getting this value from that place, right? And I think it's important. And I do think who you're with matters in some regard. I mean, I really do. I do think that, agents can be with different brokerages and they can be successful at a multitude of different places. But I do think having the backing of a successful company that, again, has the resources in place to support you, has skins on the wall, for lack of a better way to put it.
I think the other agents make a difference too.
Absolutely.
Like in life, peer group matters so much.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things when I ultimately joined, after leaving this brokerage, initially went to a larger, more kind of respectable named firm here. And that's the first thing I noticed immediately is just being around the agents. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm learning so much that I'd never got where I was.
Yeah.
And it's and they invite you into that, where I was the first time go around, it was just kind of everybody's kind of on their own. Unless you knew somebody, unless you'd been there and known somebody, but they didn't really foster an environment to bring people in and educate them and nurture them. And I think, there's I think we do that. I think there's plenty of other brokerages that do as well. But I think that's really, as a new agent, just making that determination of, do I want to have an opportunity to really grow and provide value to a team as well and learn from educated people and pick that up? Or am I going to go at it on my own, hopefully with support of the brokerage?
And that works for some people.
And it works for some people too. It does. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today.
Well, I appreciate
joining
being here.
me. I know I'm not the only agent that wants a piece of your time and to talk to you.
I appreciate it.
But I'm sure our audience appreciates it.
Yeah.
And I want to wish you a prosperous 2023.
Have you been thinking about moving to North Texas? Maybe you're looking in Plano, Dallas, Frisco, or the surrounding communities. Each year, our team helps dozens of families make the move to Texas. We'd love to help you begin your journey. Learn more on our website at hastingsre.com. That's HAISTINGSRE.com.